thanks a lot for coming along. I recommend being with you in the group, which is great. I love the rate crowd. This, basically, what I'm going to talk about is a project that I did, an 8-week/8-month project that I did while I was doing my PhD, which might explain why I'm still doing my PhD. Working for the Great Barrier Reef, no, that's where I am now, Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network. So really what I want to do today is tell you about this new report that we produced on the status of reefs in the Pacific. Essentially 3 bits. What we did, who did it, what's the sort of process we did. Secondly, what did we find out? So, what's the major flavor of issues, trends, and patterns that we see across the Pacific? And also, a few of you in the room actually work in the Pacific, so I'd be very interested in your views and any experience that you have that could help ground truth this sort of work, because I'm always interested in making sure that what we present is an accurate representation of what's on the ground. And I'll wrap up with a little bit of televangelism, my preaching, based on my own thoughts and perceptions about what we as a scientific community might need to think about if we're going to work in this space. So, Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network, essentially it is the scientific arm of this organization, the International Coral Reef Initiative. I use the word organization lightly. It's a community of practice of individuals. The GCRMN has 3 primary objectives. First is to strengthen scientific understanding of the status and trends of coral reefs around the world. To do that, we have a lot of network building and capacity building exercises to try and get together a community of coral reef practitioners to share information so that we can collate it and present reports. And then, thirdly, make these coral reef monitoring data publicly accessible in a timely manner. So the way that's usually been done is we have, every 4 years, there is a report of the status of the coral reefs of the world that is produced. Now, good stuff about this whole GCRMN process, it provides important data on the status of coral reefs. In many cases, it may be the only accessible data on reefs in some places. There have been efforts to standardize the data, so there is some comparability between times and regions, but that's a bit sketchy. Capacity building, we involve the local management agencies and communities in the process, so that builds capacity in coral reef management and monitoring. And wider, expanding that net a bit wider, we try and build a community, international community of practice of coral reef experts plugged into this system. What it also does, it means that if you have a little bit of reporting done by an NGO in one country, that can be set in a wider context of what's happening with reefs around the world or in the Pacific. Now, problems. First, we have variable data quality. We're getting data from a lot of places. The data quality varies from region to region. There's also inconsistency with the way some of the data is collected and how it's reported. If you have a look through some of the older reports, each section of countries is written by a different author. You have different language styles, different writing styles, different ways of handling information. So that can make it a bit hard to compare. We also have patchy spatial and temporal data, and there's limited in-depth analysis. If all you've got is a couple of years of very basic coral cover data, there's not a lot more you can do with that. And then we have these problems of scaling up and scaling down. So if we monitor 10 reefs in an archipelago of 500 islands, well, you can say, well, generally the reefs are healthy, but that's a scaling up issue. And then the most difficult thing from my perspective is after you've got the report, what do you do with it? And if we're supposed to be stimulating a call for action, making change on the ground, it's nice to have a shiny report, but you actually have to have resources and a plan for making that report effective. Anyway, so what I'm going to talk to you about is this project, which ran from 2011 to 2012. And the idea was to produce the first regional GCRMN style report, so only for the Pacific, focusing on the 22 Pacific island countries and territories. The idea here was to produce a synthesis of accessible information, and that's a really important word. If you're a Vanuatu fisheries officer based in Port Vila, you do not have online access to nature or science. We try to use information that could be freely accessible on the web, so that if somebody's reading through this stuff in Vanuatu, they can, if they have access to the internet, go back and actually find the source documents and read for themselves. So that was one of the important things we wanted to do. And the idea was at the end we'd have some sort of idea of what the outlook for the Pacific region's reefs were over the next 100 years. Now, some of the issues that we try to address, one author team for the whole area, so we're not having differences in the way people handle information. That means we have a systematic framework for how we bring information in, chop it up, assess it, and then present it. And then we also have an explicit accounting of uncertainty and knowledge gaps. So we're not just saying, coral reefs in Fiji are great. How certain are we that that is actually the case? And then we're having a consistent approach, an explicit approach about uncertainty. We can then start doing some better comparison between the peaks. We also wanted to introduce more of an explicit discussion about resilience. Now, these reports are only about that thick for the whole Pacific region. We started out with thinking, well, great, we'll do 5 pages for each country. That didn't work. We've more than doubled that. But even then, you just can't write everything about everything. Okay? This is not an encyclopedia of coral reefs of the Pacific. It's not a scientific review either. We draw upon scientific information, yes, but what we want to do is give information that an ambassador or a foreign minister or somebody could pick up off their desk and in 10 minutes get a quick idea of what's happening with coral reef resources in the Marshall Islands. Okay? We also wanted to make it as accessible as possible to the local people on the ground so that they can use it for their purposes as well. All right, so in producing these reports, there are other sort of spin-off benefits that we were looking for. Knowledge management, collating a whole bunch of management, storing it in reef base so that this knowledge is archived somewhere so people can access it. Again, that end game, once you have the report, making sure that you do something with it. And as part of this regular process of reporting, there's training and capacity building goes on. Yes, it's nice when you have a report that you can use to stimulate action, but you also have perverse outcomes. Just like any powerful piece of information or skill, there's good ways to use it and bad ways to use it. So, we've had some instances of dive shops putting on their website, oh, don't go over here because, look at this report, all the reefs there are screwed. So come and dive with us. So that's a perverse outcome. I'm not sure what we can do about that. All right, so here's the who. It was a big multi-author team, so we had a bunch of people from Creole, Thierry de Lisson de Loma, Serge Plans, and others. Also, a bit of work with the CRISP team, mainly Eric Kluwer, at SPC in Noumea, in New Caledonia. And then we used a lot of the data that came out of the Reefs at Risk program. So this is Loretta Berg and Katie Raytar at the World Resources Institute in Washington. And they have a whole GIS system and a process of criterion assessments that come up with these spatial maps of relative risk of coral reefs around the world. So we use a lot of that stuff. So, next few slides, just setting the scene. What is the Pacific? The Pacific's a big place. When I'm talking about the Pacific, I'm talking in the context of these 22 Pacific Island nations, countries and territories in what you could call the South Pacific. Okay? It's a huge area. We're talking 30 million square kilometers, at least 200 islands, 2,500 atolls, 9 million people, but one of the fastest rates of population growth will be 18 million by 2050. You have limited terrestrial space and resources, and we'll have a look at that in a little while. And they're also developing countries. They don't have a lot of resources and affluence. Highly dependent on the marine environment. You have not much land, and you're very, very isolated. A lot of these islands are thousands of kilometers away from their nearest neighbors. So you do have isolated communities, small places, small land area, very dependent on marine resources, and a very strong cultural identity in a lot of these places as well. Just a snapshot, some of the issues happening in the Pacific. A lot of countries have really rich forests, biodiversity. Logging in those forests is an issue. Coconuts, coconut plantations are very important for a lot of places. Tourism, wrong button. Tourism, very pretty reefs, traditional use, artisanal use, the warm and fuzzies, charismatic megafauna that are of high conservation value, and tuna fisheries. Tuna fisheries play a big part in the economies of the Pacific. Looking at some of the comparisons, big islands. You've got Papua New Guinea, the landmass of Papua New Guinea accounts for 84% of the entire landmass of all the Pacific Island nations and territories. You've got these volcanic high islands, I think this is Maui, and you have these very small islands. So this is Majuro Atoll in the Marshall Islands. That's the airport. You don't have a lot of fresh water and area here to plant coconut plantations or rainforests. That is the country of Niue, and that is 11 kilometers. Okay? We're not talking about big places. Here we have Midway Island, very nice atoll. That's the US Air Force Base. So not a lot of space to play with here. You also have a common history. Okay? We've got successive waves of colonization, independence, nuclear testing, and surprisingly, well, it's not surprisingly, some of these issues still filter through in the way society works today and can affect the way they use their resources. So, this is what we did. 7 steps. We began by building this reporting framework. Okay? We developed a system of descriptive criteria. So, if we have all this information coming in from all over the place, how do we chop this information up and put it into some sort of systematic form? So we developed descriptive criteria for handling that information, and that's all pretty much based on subjective assessment. Because you have such a diverse range of data types, really there was no good quantitative way to do it. Also, I didn't have the time or budget to do that either. Once we had that system in place, we started pulling together information from existing sources. So places like the SPREPS, Pacific Environmental Information Network, really rich sources of good information. Previous GCRMN reports, Reefs at Risk reports, even things like the CIA World Fact Book provided some interesting information. And what we wanted to do is bring all this stuff together into a package. We also wanted to clearly describe monitoring effort. One of the frustrations I had with previous GCRMN reports is you read about, yes, coral reefs are going up, down, or whatever, but you don't know where those reefs are, how many there are, how they were monitored, when they were monitored. So you really have no information about the survey to know how accurate that finding is. Once we had that data collected, we had to put that into the framework using the criteria, and then we built in the reef at risk layers country by country. Once we had each country done, that went back out to review by people on the ground, and then the whole thing got reviewed by the GCRMN management group right at the end. Now, one of the things that we were very mindful of is we did not want to reinvent the wheel. There's a crap load of stuff available already on some of these places, and they range from a big Pacific Ocean synthesis report done by the Center for Ocean Solutions. On the country level, you've got the reports to the Convention of Biological Diversity, you've got specific project reports, you've got state of the environment reports, and then Hugh Govern, which many of you will know, did a really nice report on the status of marine managed areas. So we wanted to draw this information together and provide a synthesis of these syntheses, but leave breadcrumbs so that people knew where to go to get the source documents. Make sense so far? All right. So, 5 descriptive themes. We had 5 themes that we used to bring together all this information. The first one was, I guess, status and condition, usually using CoralCoE. Theme 2 was health and resilience. So what we're looking at here was indications of are reefs able to recover from impact. So we needed longer-term data of recovery and disturbance cycles, but also data that people were collecting on processes like recruitment and disease, which gave us some idea of the health of the system. We wanted to have a look at the existing use, also what are the other factors aside from direct use that also influence reefs, and then management, what is being done. And for each one of those criteria, those themes, we subjectively ranked where they were by how much evidence there was that things were changing. So we had stable, as in things seemed to be stable in the long term. Evidence of change, things were changing, either going up or going down, or altered. They had a shifted state. Things were not like they were 20 years ago. And in doing that, we identified knowledge gaps. So this is what it looks like. We've got this system of graded blue squares. Stable is dark blue. Things are going along quite nicely as far as we can understand the state of the system. Evidence of change. Some things are changing in the system that we need to look closer. altered. Things have changed from where we understood them to be 20, 30 years ago. And then grey one, not considered. No information. There's not enough information for us to make a judgment call on any of the stuff. And then we have, positives, negatives, and utility sign, depending, which shows you where the direction of the trend is. We're also explicit about our uncertainty. So we've based these criteria on the IPCC Manager's Guide for Dealing with Uncertainty. Specifically, we're looking at value uncertainty. How accurate is this trend compared to what's actually happening on the ground? So high confidence, what we've said is highly likely to be true on the ground. Medium confidence, low confidence. So when you put everything together, here we have the theme of reef condition. This one, well, got some evidence of change because we're in this square here. The change is in a negative direction, but we have very little confidence in, it's a low confidence assessment. Make sense so far? Awesome. All right, so that's how it works. Let's jump into the interesting stuff. 4 case studies. The idea here is to show you how the framework works, but also to illustrate some of the diversity in the different countries of the Pacific. So here we have our case study of Fiji, 320 islands, 500 Ks, very large ocean area, very great coral diversity. Half the population is rural, and they get 75% of their protein from the sea. Tourism is a major source of income. Now, when you open the chapter to Fiji, the very first thing you come across is this information presented right up. So you get some idea of the country and its people. A very quick snapshot. Now, that hasn't been done in any of the previous GCRMN reports. So we're trying to bring in some more of that social and geological information. Having a look at how reefs are going there, well, we've got pretty good data. The USP, University of South Pacific, is based in Fiji, and they've been monitoring reefs since 1999. So they'll say that, yes, we've got pretty good confidence in the amount of data at multiple sites across multiple years. And we find that things go up and down, but overall, our coral cover seems to be stable. Now, that's nice, but it does seem that there is some change in resilience, some decline in resilience. So we do have rapid cycles of recovery, as you would expect after disturbances, but we have seen changes in reef communities and processes. Some signs of degradation in recovery, probably due to land-based pollution and low numbers of exploited species. So things are changing in terms of process and community structure. In terms of how people are using the reef, some information available suggests that the state of reef resources, things that people go and take to harvest and use, are also changing. Activities of most concern, subsistence commercial fishing, and potentially aquarium collecting as well. So let's have a look at, there's a box behind there that you can't see. Management effectiveness, variable. What we found is that there's good evidence of strong community-based management in Fiji, and even though the legislation exists to build that into government centralized management, it's not actually done that well on the ground. At least this is what we're reading. And we also found that there are other factors. For example, the social unrest, the coup. We still can't have a conference in Fiji because the Australian government doesn't recognise the government, blah, 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 blah. That also caused problems in the way society worked, which also had impacts on the use of natural resources as well. Now, one of the things I just wanted to illustrate here is, here's the text where we are explicit for the first time, and every country has this text. We are explicit about where the data come from. We've got point intercept transects, belt transects, 13 locations since 1999, also use the AIMS survey techniques, and then we've got other stuff that was been taught. So when you're reading this text, you understand exactly where the data are coming from. All right, looking at the reef at risk projections. Well, according to the reefs at risk folks, probably about just over half of Fiji's reefs are at risk. The biggest problem seems to be overfishing and destructive fishing, but water-based pollution and coastal development are also issues as well. Then when they factor in the effects of thermal stress and ocean acidification based on projections, the business as usual case scenario from IPCC. This is what they found. By 2013, 2030, all of the reefs in Fiji will be at risk according to their criteria. Looking at that spatially, we've got the main islands, Viti Levu, Vanuatu, and the Yasawas. Those are mainly at risk. More remote islands at much lower risk. And that's not really that surprising. Right. So, where are we with management? Sorry, this is what I was getting to before. There are still some challenges in play. But the ecology bill, which was this bill to sort of build in locally community-led management, apparently was one of the factors leading up to the 2006 military coup. So when you have a military coup in your country, that can be quite destabilizing if you're trying to talk about fisheries management and everything else. All right, case study 2, Nauru. Completely different. One island nation. The whole island is 21 square kilometers. 300,000 square kilometers of ocean, so huge EEZ. This sort of scar that you can see here, it's phosphate mine. So, I don't know, what, maybe just under a quarter of your country's landmass is taken up by one industry. And when that mine collapsed, big problems. So, GDP, 60 million a year. US GDP per capita not that high. Population growth, still quite high. Urban population, well, you've got one island. Everyone lives in this one spot. No data. There have been efforts to establish GCRMN and coral reef monitoring transects. There's a couple of snapshots of places, but really there's no data available on the status of reefs in Nauru or their health and resilience. We can make some guesses, but to do a proper assessment, we just don't know. Use of reef resources, altered. We've got reports of kids not going to school now because they're going out on the reef flat and they're gleaning the reef flat. Big declines in a whole bunch of resources, trochus, fish, etc., etc., etc. One of the things that they've done to try and ameliorate that is introduce fish aggregation devices, and these are used in a lot of places around the Pacific. So just off the reef edge, you put your fad, you attract in your more productive pelagic fishes, your tunas and jacks and everything else, and then you just paddle out and you go and fish those. Now, when they first put them in, they were too far out. So people couldn't afford the fuel to put in the motors to access the fad. So that didn't really work very well. In terms of governance and management, altered. There's been the Nauru guys working in fisheries resources, majorly under-resourced, and there's a major lack of capacity as well to deal with some of these problems. Very high dependence on fish, but fisheries have declined. It was difficult to get to the fads, people couldn't afford the fuel. Really, really highly isolated. A lot of this food stuff coming in to Nauru comes from is airflow from other places. So it's they're highly dependent on other nations. And I don't know what your personal politics are on detention centres, but I can understand why the Nauru government would want detention centres on Nauru to have another source of foreign income. Reefs at risk in Nauru, high, pretty much across the board. Nauru is probably, compared to all the other spots in the Pacific that we assessed, their reefs have the highest number of reefs at risk. Up to 80% is predicted to be at critical states by 2050. And you just look through the paper, and there's a lot of discussion about Nauru and some of the problems there. All right, Guam, case study number 3, completely different again. Guam is a territory. Okay, it's not its own country. It has a U.S. administrative arrangement. So it's under, can't remember what the exact name of the treaty is called. They do have their own local government, but that sits under U.S. federal law. Okay, one island territory again. The rest of the Mariana Island archipelago goes up to the north, and that's its own country. But Guam is a U.S. territory, mostly because of its military strategic importance. Guam was very important in World War II and still remains today. And, you guys are up to the news. This is one of the spots that Kim Jong-un is targeting, and the US have just put all their missiles in there to try and shoot down nukes that are heading their way. So their population. Well, they've got 560 kilometres of land. Population is actually quite high, and by 2050, we're talking close to 270,000 people. Population growth is quite high. Urban population, 93%, so most people live in urban places, not on rural farms, so very different to Fiji. GDP, quite high. Guam's actually quite an important tourism spot. You have a lot of US service personnel as well, that, well, they provide another source of income. So having a look at Guam's reefs, while long-term monitoring, a structured program of long-term monitoring has only really just begun, there is a lot of history of monitoring going back from, there's the University of Guam, the Guam Marine Lab, got a lot of data. Some reefs appear to be in good condition, others not so. So there are signs of localized declines in reefs around Guam. Since the 1960s, because they're very fortunate, got data going back 50 years, there are clear declines in reef conditions, coral cover that you can see. Also, in terms of their health and resilience, clear declines since the 60s as well. Changes in fish structure, increasing disease, and changes in community, changes in declines in recruitment and recruitment survival as well. So resilience of some of Guam's reefs seems to be going down as well. In the way reefs are used, well, you've got, again, the US, a lot of money, territory, good data. We've got good fisheries data that show that the types of fish being caught and the size of those fish, those are going down as well. So we do have problems in Guam. And one of the problems, not only in Guam but other places in the Pacific, is spearfishing. Particularly night spearfishing, going after the really, on scuba, by the way, going after the really, really big fish, sometimes to feed the tourism trade. And because you can target those big fish very efficiently, the biomass is much lower. So you have a look at this graph here. So this is your large fish biomass. That's Guam. That's Santa Rosa, which is like the next sort of islands up to the north. And then the other islands are the Mariana Islands, much, much higher. So where you've got lots of people on Guam, they've really hammered the fish stocks there. Other factors: coastal development, tourism, US military base. So, aircraft carriers are pretty big. Guam is blessed because it has a very deep water harbour that can accommodate these big nuclear-powered carriers. So there's an Air Force base, there's a naval base, I think there's a Marine base as well on Guam. That's a lot of development pressure and a lot of land that gets set aside for US military use. So coastal development is one of the issues that they are certainly dealing with. And with coastal development comes things like sedimentation, pollution, etc. What's holding Guam in its favour, I guess, is that resource base that comes with being a US territory. So they do have a pretty good governance structure. They've got US federal law, so they will come under US federal environmental law that has to be administered through local acts. And they've got a few MPAs, but some of Guam's resources are definitely on the way down, and more work needs to be done. And you have all these competing pressures. So you have a growing population, you've got a big US military buildup. So the US lost Subic Bay in the Philippines. They're very interested in maintaining their strategic power in the Pacific. So they're really in a lot of, and it's not just Guam, but some of their other military sites as well. There's a lot of investment in building up naval forces in these places. You've got fishing issues, you've got development. Now, one thing to note here is you have centralized management. Whereas effective on-ground management in Fiji might depend on local communities, centralized management systems may not recognize those as well. Also because the community has changed so much, you have such a high expat population, you've got these military institutions, you're a territory, really, you don't have you'll have less independent freedom. Centralized government that comes from the top down is much more, plays a much more prominent role in natural resource management. The good side, though, is again, you've got good resources and expertise, which means you can do really cool stuff like this. So we have a look here. This is the brown tree snake. They're endemic to Papua New Guinea, Australia, the Solomon Islands. They landed up on Guam during World War II. Had a lot of traffic coming through there. So no predators, they've just gone way out of control. There are an estimated 2 million brown tree snakes on the island now, which is not a big place. They've wiped out 10 of the 12 endemic bird species, and because they've lost the birds, the spiders are out of control. No one's eating the spiders. So you've got mildly venomous snakes everywhere that people don't like. You've got spiders everywhere that people don't like, and you've lost your birds. So the Americans, being the great innovators and resources, having the resources they have created this sort of idea to have this mice parachute core. So you inject, or you put Tylenol in these mice, and then they've made these parachutes. So you go up in helicopters, and you drop the mice out of the helicopter, and they parachute down, and then they get caught in the trees. And you want them to get caught in the trees, because that's where the tree snakes are. If they're on the ground, other things are going to be eating them. So you want them to be caught in the trees. But you want the parachute to be designed in such a way that the snake will still accept the mouse. So they went through this whole design phase, and this started this year. I think in February. They've got an experimental plot outside Anderson Air Force Base, and they're airdropping mice, poison mice, onto the snakes. So watch this space. It's written up in PLOS. PLOS publish anything. Last case study. French Polynesia. Very different again. French territory. 118 islands. Absolutely massive area of ocean. It's huge. Okay? A lot more land, but really, really spread out across all these small islands. Population, getting close to 300. We don't know what the population projection is going to be for 2050. I kind of think it's about 1.2% growth, but that's a bit iffy. Urban population, half and half. So around the main society islands, so that's Tahiti, Moorea, etc. Those are the urban centres. A lot more people living in those centres. Obviously, those centres don't exist in some of these outer islands like the Tuamotus and the Marquesas, so that's a much more rural existence. Pretty good GDP, a lot of income from tourism. So the status of their reefs, reliable long-term data available for quite a number of sites in French Polynesia. From what we can see, seems to be stable. So there's a lot of disturbances that come through, cots, cyclones, coral bleaching, etc., but the reefs seem to be coming back in most places. So that indicates fairly good resilience as well. So in terms of condition, at the moment some reefs are going up, some reefs are going down. That's what we'd expect. There is good long-term data there. You've got 2 research stations just on Moorea alone, so you have a rich source of data there. But because the place is so damn big, you've got good data for a small number of sites relative to the whole place, and that's going to reduce the confidence in this assessment for the whole country. Having more of a detailed look, here we've got, this is Melody Trapon's paper, which many of you guys will know. What we've got here is we've got coral cover, and disturbance, recovery, disturbance, recovery, disturbance, recovery. You've got coral bleaching, cot outbreaks, and cyclones. So this is one transept at 5 to 10 metres at shallow, and this is 10 to 30 deep. Just off of Moorea here, which is just off Tahiti. So somewhere around this sort of area going off the reefs of the lagoon. Lots of disturbance, but they're bouncing back. The way reefs are used, well, it looks like things are pretty good, but there is some evidence of change. On some of the reef atolls where there is some work done on fish, looks like there are changes in biomass and the abundance of large fish again. Some of the other reefs, especially around the population centres, are being affected by the same old suspects, sedimentation, pollution. When I was there a couple of years ago, I was just walking down the road, and a guy had an excavator, big excavator, just coming up the side of this hill, just ploughing everything down. And I asked the locals what was going on. He said, oh yeah, he's just clearing this pad. And that pad was like that. So he could build his house there on stilts. But it's erosion. You can see the erosion already happening.
Just like here.
Yeah, fair enough, John. Fair enough. Other industries, aquaculture for Tahiti pearl, very, very important. So that's definitely one use of marine resources. In terms of reef at risk, because there's so many reefs spread out, French Polynesia is probably in one of the better spots in terms of their reefs at risk. However, once we get up to 2050, you bring in the big bat of climate change, and a lot of the reefs are still going to be at least at medium levels of risk. Having a look spatially, yeah, same old story. Around population centres in the Society Islands, Tahiti, Moorea, Bora Bora, etc., more development, more people living there, your reefs at risk are much higher. Whereas you go out to the Tuamotus, in some of these remote areas, much less pressure, according to the reef at risk folk. So in terms of the governance, again, this is a territory. They don't have their own country, they're a territory of France. So French environmental law plays a large part in the way natural resources in Fiji. Damn Fiji. Where am I? French Polynesia. French Polynesia is managed. Okay. One of the things we tried to do was get an idea of, is there any data to tell us whether this management is being effective or not? So you can look at your environmental indicators of coral cover, etc., and see where you're going. And that's one way of doing it. But for each country, we tried to see if there was any assessment of management effectiveness. And really, not much. So a lot of these, I don't think there is any country in our report that has high confidence for the effectiveness of governance and management, where that's going. So wrapping up French Polynesia, huge area, centralized management, remote reefs in much better condition, and logistical issues. It's a huge area. So, these guys brought in a shark fishing ban. You can't catch and kill sharks and stuff in French Polynesia, which is a great move. But trying to enforce that over 500,000 square kilometers of ocean is a gargantuan task. All right, the next series of slides, these are just a few snapshots of the Pacific. I've given you details about 4, but the Pacific is 4 countries, but the Pacific is a really diverse place. So this next series of slides, just a series of short stories to give you an idea of everything else that's happening. So here we have an extract from the Tokelau National Strategic Plan. So this is a government document saying for Tokelau, this is where we're going to go up to 2015. What they're seeing is climate change has had an obvious effect, more cyclones, more storm surges, these are more intense, we've got plants that have already disappeared, we've got increasing salinity levels of the soil, threatening our water security and threatening our crops, disappearance of some small islets already due to sea level, erosion of coastal areas, disappearance of plants, diminishing availability of fish is a major concern for Tokelau, concern that developed nations, they do not heed the warnings of scientists. We're going to end into one of those scenarios where Tokelau is going to lose, we're going to lose our country. And that's pretty confronting when you realize that this is a national, it's like Julia Gillard coming up and saying this happening to Australia. This is happening to them. So, there's no debate for these guys. As far as these guys are concerned, climate change is real, it's happening, and they're really, really worried. Other issues, marine debris. We've all heard about the Great Garbage Patch floating around the Pacific Gyre. I thought this really brought it home. This is one of my co-authors. An extract of his email. America Samoa has a huge litter problem. Marine debris is found in most dives around populated areas. I think most of it's washed away, so it becomes someone else's problem. But one place it piles up is Palo Lagoon. I recently saw a kid paddling a refrigerator offshore from my house. When he was done, he got up, pushed the fridge back out into the current. I mean, I wish he'd gotten a photo, but that's the reality of what's happening in some of these places. This is a shot from Helen Reef in Palau. Here we have a community, an individually built, designed, and applied source of transport. He's got a hut, he's got a raft, he's got stuff hanging off the edge to attract fish, and he ended up there from the Philippines. So he was out there, we think he was part of they have these structures with fads hanging off the edge to collect tuna, somehow got attached or lost, and essentially floated from the Philippines to Helen Reef in Palau, and washed up there, lucky for him. But just some crazy stuff. This is in Kiribati. One of the issues that a lot of these countries are dealing with is globalization. So you have increasing numbers of young people looking for work. You've got increasing exposure to modern technology. I mean, number of mobile phones, it's quite amazing. You may not have electricity, but people have got mobile phones in their villages. With that awareness and change in society, people want, refrigerators and cars and TVs and stuff. And you can understand that. We've got changes moving away from subsistence economies to cash economies. So that means people are going out to catch more fish so that they can afford this stuff. But if you're on a really small island, what do you do with all the trash? It just builds up. So here we have, this is just a pile of garbage that's outside the garbage dump in Kiribati because there's nowhere else to put it. And here we have some more garbage. People have just driven up to the beach and just started dumping, and once someone sees people dumping there, it just builds up. This is one of the unintended consequences, I guess, of changes in the way society works. Climate change, this is Kiribati again. You've got some of these very low-lying roads, causeways on atolls. As sea level rises, and with more storms and stuff, a lot of this stuff is being damaged and washed away. So this is a real concern for these guys. They're losing, it's affecting the water table, so they're losing their water supply, and that also affects all their crops that they grow, like taro and everything else in some of the other islands. On the rainforested islands, logging is a big issue, and along with logging comes everything else, including traditional land rights, customary rights, claims of corruption, violence, bribery, etc., etc., etc. It's a murky world. I'm not an expert in logging, but the little bit I have read, it's a murky world in terms of it's the way government deal with it and its effects on the way people live on the land, and then again that flows into what the state of the environment is and how people use the environment. This is from Helen Reef again. Helen Reef off Palau is a marine park, so it's a reserve. It's a very valuable reserve. It's been a reserve for a long time, and this is all the long line, shark long line, that got pulled up off that reef. Now this reef has a permanent ranger station on it, but even with that, illegal fishing still does take place, and you have to wonder what the situation is in other places if fishermen are going to target illegally a reef that has a permanent ranger station on it. Here's another shot from Palau. So this isn't Helen Reef. This is a reef near Toby, which is sort of on the way back to the main islands of Palau. Here we have a Perth seiner. They've run aground and they've just abandoned it. So there's nobody there. And what you do have, there's other photos, this big seine net actually falls off the hull and is draped along the reef. So I don't know what's going to happen to that ship, but it's in the middle of nowhere. I think the salvage options are going to be fairly limited before the next big storm comes along. Climate change. So Johan Bell and others did a really nice Pacific look at what's happening with fisheries with climate change. This paper came out in Nature a couple of months ago. Essentially, in the east part of the Pacific, your tuna stocks are going to go up. In the west part of the Pacific, your tuna is going to go down. So there's winners and losers here. Coral reef fisheries, universally. So if you're living on coral reef fisheries, you're going to face some big challenges. However, with the way climate looks like it's going to change, freshwater fisheries might improve, and we all sort of cringe at the thought of breeding more tilapia, but for food security, that's the reality. People have to eat. And ponds, so aquaculture ponds on the land, yep, but coastal aquaculture is probably going to be in trouble. One of the things I didn't really think about much was actual coral harvesting. So here we have some shots from Jürgen Freund and his wife Stella. People in Papua New Guinea going out, collecting staghorn coral, drying it out in the sun, and then you burn it, and then you pound it to make lime that you chew with your betel nut. And in particular places, this is a real source of localized pressure in Papua New Guinea. Other snapshots, when you have a Centre for Legal Studies writing papers with the title, The Killing of the Fly, State Corporate Victimization in Papua New Guinea, it gives you an idea that there are some big problems happening in governance in some of these countries. This is a shot of the Fly River in Papua New Guinea. Doesn't look very good. And one of the emerging issues in the Pacific is this idea of deep sea mining, where you've got ships that basically just come along and they hoover up minerals. There are, I think it's New Caledonia, there's stuff like just nodules of manganese on the bottom. And they just want to come along, suck the stuff up, and then drop all the dredge spoil out. So deep sea mining is something that we're trying to catch up with and get a handle of. And then you've got other snapshots, some of the politics that goes behind the Pacific, which affects how different countries and nations deal with each other. Here we have the naval warship, that's the Otago, I think, and that's the Canterbury. And in 1973, when the French were nuking Mururoa, Australia and New Zealand didn't like that. They actually sent warships into the testing zone to protest and try and stop the atmospheric tests. They also thought it was a good idea if we're going to send our soldiers, well, our sailors in there, we'll send a minister in as well. So this lucky guy, Fraser Coleman, who's the Minister of Immigration and Mines, he got picked, his name was picked out of a hat, so they put him on this ship and sent him off and to protest. Now the French went ahead with the test anyway, so the ships were there, ooh, bright light. He didn't die from that, but that protest was perhaps not so successful. Other factors, population growth, poverty. Population growth is increasing in the Pacific. That's going to drive more demand on resources, and then poverty as well. You have countries that are isolated with limited amounts of resources. You've got globalization and migration, and those factors changing the way people interact with the land and resources. You've got climate change. You've got all the old disturbances. You've got military influences. You've got the politics of tuna, which is big business, and just history about how governments and territories and traditional people interact. You've got change in fishing practices. You've got pollution, poor coastal development. There's a whole bunch of stuff happening in the Pacific. When we look at the threats, it's the usual suspects. Overfishing, particularly of coastal fishes, things like green snails, sea cucumbers, aquarium fishes, and clams, but also a lot of the more accessible reef predators, your trouts, snappers, etc., etc. Offshore tuna, there's governance issues there, there's sustainability issues for some species, and then you have things about equity, of who's making money out of this industry, and is it going back to the people who own that EEZ, that exclusive economic zone. Erosion sedimentation, coastal development, habitat loss, pollution, blah, 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 blah. Put on board the new kids on the block, climate change, increasing population growth, and, as we said, social changes. All right, overall, though, the good news, many reefs are in pretty good condition. There's no overall trend, except to say that where reefs are further away from human impacts, the better they seem to be. For most countries, there's already a really good legislative base. There is sound management and legislation in place. It's just not being implemented. Another good point that these guys have in their favour is their regional organisations. So bodies like SPREP, the SPC, the Forum Fisheries Agency, the Pacific Island Forum. There are structures in place to help all the PICs work together to put forward a Pacific-wide agenda that benefits them. So that puts them in a much stronger position than they'd be if they were going it alone. Then there's a whole bunch of new initiatives. The Phoenix Island Protected Area, the Coral Triangle Initiative, Northwestern Hawaiian Islands, etc., 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 etc. All right, having a look at where reefs are at risk across the entire Pacific. Simple. If you're remote, you're okay. If you're close to population centres, you're not very much higher risk. We've got overexploited reef fisheries. We've got all these complex interactions and drivers. This makes it very, very difficult to deal with things. It's very difficult to unpack some of these issues to manage them. Declining resilience in some areas, and limited resources and capacity. It's also getting more complicated once, again, you introduce some of these new factors. So what does the future look like? If we take a scenario-based approach and present 4 scenarios, very good outlook, poor outlook, and very poor outlook, and you grade those by descriptions. For very good, It's highly likely to remain healthy and resilient. Most reefs will remain in good condition, blah, 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 blah. Whereas very poor is without massive intervention, coral reefs of the Pacific will experience widespread degradation and loss over the next 50 years. If we look at where we are on the scale of those things, given the criteria in these descriptors, I'd say that we're probably in an assessment of poor. The outlook for the reefs of the Pacific is poor, mostly due to the scary predictions about what's going to happen with thermal stress and ocean acidification. So even while you have remote reefs that are relatively sheltered from intense human use, you bring in climate change, and the story is not so good. So what do we do now? Well, global action on climate change, same old story. At the local issue, address the local issues of fishing, development, waste and pollution. And yes, we've heard this before. This is the same stuff that's been repeated since, I don't know, the late 80s. Doesn't mean that it's out of favor or not wrong. We just need to do it better. We need to also, I think, tackle some of the drivers and think a little bit more about when we're dealing with natural resource management, how does this link back to the social and cultural context within which we're working? So population growth, health and development, globalization, how do these affect the things that we are trying to manage? And I'm going to say, I think we need better multidisciplinary approaches, better working between not only social scientists and biologists or ecologists, which we've all been saying before, but thinking about natural resource managers working with people working in the development field, in education and in health. I don't know. I think there's a lot of support to suggest that we should keep investing in community-based management in the Pacific and finding ways to resource management. Like I said, there's good management arrangements in place for most of these countries. This is a patrol boat in Palau. The only reason this patrol boat was out there is because a private donor from a country outside Palau paid money to provide the fuel and the salary for these guys to do their patrol route. So, that's not a good situation. All right, so some of my personal observations. For us as scientists, if we think our science is relevant to the Pacific, I think we need to have some understanding of the complexity of the place that we're working with and understand the local context. Understand, well, yep, I've done this study on MPAs, but is this really the answer? Or how will this work when we've got the other issues of food security, poverty, development, and just the way the community is structured? You may need the local priest to agree before you try and establish an MPA. You have to work with people, understand capacity limitations, but also realize that there are a lot of people working already in the Pacific. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. Plug into the networks that are already there. Lastly, this is a big one for me, publication, publication, publication. We have to publish. We're scientists. This is our bread and butter. If you're going to apply the stuff that you have learned, publication is the start of the process. Because the guys in Vanuatu fisheries don't have access to your journal. Even if you sent the journal to them, that is probably not the best way to package the lessons learned, information, and advice. Now, if you think your research has a role in natural resource management and conservation in the Pacific, I think we've got to do a better job in making that stuff available. Now, Reef-Based Pacific and SPREP have information portals where you can put information in so that Pacific people can access them. There's also a whole raft of newsletters. If you've got a paper that's just come out, you think it's interesting and relevant, break it down into layman speak, put it in the SPC Coastal Fisheries newsletter so it gets to the people who it needs to get to. And also think about some of the perverse outcomes. Use local advice when you're thinking about these things. And that's it for me. I'll shut up now. And I'm happy to take questions, criticism, and comments. Thank you. Start.
Andrew, I like that. That was fun. The little method of sort of,
communicating the state of each of the coral reefs, the areas through little boxes. And have you had much feedback about that and how well that worked?
I've had limited feedback. Speaking of which, one thing I forgot to mention is I have one last box of hard copies here. So if you want your own copy, just come up and help yourself. The limited feedback I've had has been good, but there hasn't been the follow-up in terms of actually evaluating what the effects of this project were. And GCRMN has gone through a huge reorganisation, so a lot of the stuff that, frankly, I think should have been done didn't happen because it got dropped off in that transition. I mean, I would have liked to have run a proper survey, and maybe there's still time to do it. I don't know. Finding out how it works. Everyone I've met from the Pacific, I put a copy of the book in their hand and said, tell me if this is wrong. You need to let me know. And no one's done that yet, but, maybe they're just being polite.
How robust do you think the reefs risk stuff is? Because I noticed for Nauru, you said there was no data available on the reefs, all the processes, and then that had the worst outlook of all the case studies you showed.
The reef at risk stuff, there's always going to be this problem of scaling up and scaling down, because they work on grids. So when it comes to their projections for future thermal and ocean acidification stress, basically they've taken block grids, and I can't remember what the size of those grids are, but they've taken block grids and plugged that into sort of the ocean forecast models and stuff like that to come up with, well, where are the biggest effects, where do we think the biggest effects are going to be, and just basically overlaid that across countries. Now, I think that's how it's worked for the ocean acidification and thermal stress stuff. In terms of that sort of localized scale, what you're talking about is there's no real data for Nauru, so how do we code this all as red? I can't remember what the criteria they actually use are, but I know that CoralCoE would be one of those. I think they would have a look at maps of land use over time, how those have changed, erosion, reports of pollution and all that sort of stuff, and done it from, if we're talking about risk, where are the areas that are most likely to experience the greatest number of insults or disturbances? And they've done it like that without actually using that actual coral data. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's not perfect, and I know that the reefs at risk guys have had their share of criticism. I don't know enough about the spatial analysis that they did to really be able to give you detail about that. But on the other hand, if you're trying to do something at a global scale, you've got to work with what you got. And as long as you're systematic about the way you handle information and you are explicit about the uncertainty when you're presenting a view, I think if that's the best available information, it is what it is. David, any comments? Not to put you on the spot.
No, it's interesting. This sort of analysis, which brings everything together, it's really great to see that happening. And you have to rely on what's already there, or you're going back to scratch each time.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to pick holes in it, but it's also very valuable work. I was interested again that in a few of those graphs, you saw the real degradation between 2030 and 2050. It'll be pretty flat until then wow, it's gone. So I'd be interested to dig down a bit and see exactly how that's driven.
Yeah. So all the reefs at risk stuff is obviously online, and they've got like a whole, it's a whole technical blurb. I'm not a station analyst, but it seems to me as a layman that that thinking has been in there. But it's pretty scary. Yeah. And when we were doing this right at the end, the final, what's the assessment? Is it good, very good, poor, blah blah blah? Without throwing the reef at risk projections in, the outlook is probably good when you consider the sheer scale of the Pacific.
Yeah, and a few other things. Also the sort of coloured boxes. There seems to be an assumption that stable is a good state to be, but you've got to remember a completely degraded reef is extremely stable.
Yeah.
So the language is a bit...
And that's, yeah, so there's, again, at the end of the report, there's a whole bunch of criteria. And, we had this whole round, and I say we, I had to come up with this stuff. So, do you call it good, poor, or, or is it high, medium, or low? How do you use the terminology? And given the variability of the data and the paucity of data in some places, the best we could come up with, which was accurate for all cases, was, well, is it the same as it was? Yeah. Or has it changed to something else, given what we know about it?
There's almost an explicit assumption that change is downwind, which I guess is borne out by the empirical evidence.
Well, actually, one of the things we did is, usually you see red, orange, and green. Green is good, red's bad. And we actually moved away from that because the yellows, right, when you're driving, yellow means, oh, caution, slow down. But something could be moving from a red state to a yellow state, which is positive. So we just chose shades of blue to try and get around that preconception. That change goes up and down. And I think in some places, I think New Caledonia is one, for example. Management is actually in that middle box, but it's got a plus on it because there's been a lot of stuff happening in New Caledonia that's improving, hopefully, the outlook. So. But again, the circle there is dotted.
What are they doing in New Caledonia?
There was some new stuff that was happening with fisheries. There was the declaration of the World Heritage Area. There was a new plan, I think, that came out for marine parks. I'll have to actually.
I just wondered what they're doing with the runoff from nickel mines.
Oh yeah, that's.
Set of our East Coast reefs, West Coast reefs.
Yeah, and if you look at factors influencing reefs, certainly mining is right up there as one of the big ones. But I guess that comes back to what you were saying before. It's a plus, but your plus is coming from a very low. If you've got nothing and everything's trashed, and you sort of, actually, maybe we won't catch that species. Yeah, that's a movement in the right direction. But yeah. No questions from UQ? Is it UQ?
No.